Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Virtual Cheese Awards 2024 class judging. My name's Cara, and I'm moderating this session this morning. The session we are moderating is J1 Artisan Cheese made from farm's own herd cow's milk. I'd like to introduce you to our amazing judges for this morning, and I will let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do. Right?
Hi, I'm Bronwyn Percival. I am the technical director of Neal's Yard Dairy, and I also am the chair of the Specialist Cheesemakers Association Technical Committee, where I work with Sarah and have for several years. And I'm really excited to be judging for the Virtual Cheese Awards because, in part, first of all, because I think it's a very interesting exercise, but also in part because they're so generous with sponsoring bursary places to the Science of Artisan Cheese conference that we put on every August. So thanks very much. And yeah, looking forward to this class.
Thanks, Bronwyn, and over to you, Em.
Hello, I'm Emma Young. I am also called the Cheese Explorer on Instagram. I'm a cheese monger by trade. I train cheese retailers in all things retail around the world, and I write a bit about cheese as well. I've just written a book called The Cheese Wheel, which is all about flavour. So I'm also very excited to be here. We've got an incredibly exciting category ahead. Oh yeah. Thanks, Cara. We've got an exciting category in front of us, loads of variety, so I'm very excited 4 more times.
Fantastic. So for anybody that is unfamiliar with the Virtual Cheese Awards judging system, the judges will be judging 4 attributes: appearance, aroma, texture, and flavour for each of the cheeses that we have today. And I think we're all ready to go. So the first cheese we're looking at is J1 1039.
Okay, so that is...
You're going to show the, okay, I'll show the cheese. Here we are.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Fantastic. So, initial thoughts.
Quite a pretty shape. I like it. I like how sort of compact and sort of even it looks while being a bit, artisan looking as well. My first impression when I took it out of the packaging is it's a tiny bit tacky on the rind, which leaves a bit of a film on my fingers. What do you think, Emma?
Exactly the same. I like the sort of compact design. It's got some very nice mold formation on the outside, but absolutely it is very tacky, not just on the bottom, it's sort of all around on all the faces. So it's giving off quite a lot of ammonia as well at the moment, but we'll cut into it and see what happens.
Okay, off you go, guys.
So that is the inside. It is a blue.
It's a lovely blue. Would
Yeah.
you mind holding it a little bit closer to the camera? Sorry, Em.
Is that good?
Fine.
Lovely. Is it glistening?
Quite shiny and evenly broken down. I like that. It's, sometimes with blue cheeses, if they're not quite ripe, they can be quite chalky still, quite chalky and acidic, or you can see that they have a chalky core and they're breaking down from the outside, but this looks quite evenly broken down all the way through, which I would say is a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a nice sort of pudgy texture to it. The breakdown is all the way through. It's even got a bit of extra breakdown just under the rind, so it has still got a bit of a two-tone even though it's broken down throughout. And the bluing is very much sort of concentrated in the middle, which is yeah, it's got a sort of a medium amount of bluing so far. I can smell a fair amount of aroma coming off it, but looks wise it looks very pretty so far.
Lovely. I guess I should just say dive in if you haven't already.
Oh yeah.
Emma, I'm never sure if I'm supposed to eat the rind of cheeses like these. Do you eat the rind of this kind of cheese?
I have done, just because it's so small. I figure that when they're this size and it feels like it's quite an integrated part of the cheese, I've gone for it. So as you said, usually I'd probably go paste thin rind, but I went full in. It's all in right now.
It's 8 in the morning, it's 9 in the morning, and we're going for it.
Go for it. So in the mouth, the texture is quite nice and silky. The same as you can sort of see in the paste, it breaks down nicely. The mold within has got a bit of textural difference. So I have got a tiny bit of a chew in certain bits of the bluing, which is okay, but it's slightly distracting. What do you think, Bronwyn?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. It's hard to avoid that kind of grainy texture in cheeses of this sort of soft texture when they're blue. I think all in all, it holds it pretty well. It has a nice mushroomy flavor. I find that the ammonia aroma I think primarily from the breakdown in the rind and the way that it's been packaged, it kind of drowns out a little bit of that sort of quite gentle mushroominess in the middle. Yeah, I mean, I think as a cheese of this style, it's a very good exercise. Yeah, it's very competently put together. Let's put it that way.
Brilliant.
I agree on the ammonia thing. I also think that in flavour, if that was toned back, it would still be a nice sort of subtle profile. I think the complexity is not there, but that may be the style of it. But the ammonia is slightly drowning out those other more subtle flavours at the minute.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, do we want to give a go at scoring the appearance?
Sure. I think I would say 6 on appearance.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Lovely in the middle. It looks quite uniform. It's just the tackiness on the outside. I think 6 is nice.
Okay. Aroma, guys.
Aroma, possibly slightly less for me, just because of that full-on whack of ammonia and not much else coming through. So maybe more of a 5.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yep.
Again, I think if there were a way to get this cheese to the customer with a little bit less of that sort of stewed in aroma element, then that, I mean, I think this is a better cheese than it's showing given its packaging. But I also think that probably that packaging is an unavoidable part of the cheese, and we should be like rating it holistically on that basis. So yeah, I would agree 5.
I'm just double checking that, so for the producer, that those scores are not related to the packaging.
I
Sorry,
think
that it's not related to the packaging itself. It's more about what you believe the flavor of the cheese is.
yeah, I think that based on the moisture, based on the composition of this cheese, at the point when it's ripe to sell, it's probably going to be quite ammoniated, and that's a big part of the, you know, of the aroma. And so yeah, I think I think it's fair.
Great. Okay, moving on to texture, which I guess is mouthfeel and the actual texture of the cheese.
I think I like the texture. Sorry, I do like the texture. I like that sort of glossy, pudgy texture within the rinds. In this style, they can have a tendency to possibly be a bit more gritty or less integrated, which I think they've done okay. It's just the sort of slightly granularity in the middle of the bluing inside, but overall, I think it's quite nice.
Yeah, I agree. I'm impressed by the texture. I would probably give that a 7.5.
Yeah. We are on form. This is good. I completely agree.
Brilliant. And finally, guys, flavor.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the flavor within the cheese. You know, obviously flavor and aroma are really tied together. And so the fact that there is so much ammonia, I think it detracts a little bit from the overall score, which for the inside of the cheese is quite nice, round, gentle, warm. I would probably go with, you know, 6, 6.5.
6.5, I think I'm at. I think 6 is fair. Yeah.
6.
Great.
Hey, ladies, thank you very much. It's our first cheese done. We're looking for cheese number J1 1039 next, please.
1039. Wait, that was 1039. Sorry.
Yes, it was. Sorry. I apologize. 1051.
No problem. There we go.
1051 in the code.
And let me give you 1051 in the cheese. There you go.
Lovely.
Great.
It's a very fun category. We've gone complete polar opposite in style straight away. You're testing us.
Absolutely. No holding back.
What were we going to say about the appearance today?
I think Emma's right to be giving it a bit of a scrape. You know, backpacking can often leave cheeses a little bit sort of a little bit injured on the outside, and just uncovering the fresh cheese underneath that surface that's been in contact with plastic is very important.
Thanks for explaining that, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to explain. It's not that there's mold on the surface or anything like that. They really do just benefit. You can immediately smell when you've scraped it, the difference. It's quite remarkable for everyone who's eating cheese at home as well. It's a great tip. Right.
I'm very jealous because I don't get the cheese to.
Oh no. Okay, so we have a very different cheese. We've got a sort of a hard cheese here. Appearance wise, is that a plastic coat?
It is.
Yeah.
Quite a clean, you can see the back of this. It looks like it's been covered with plastic coat that probably has some sort of mold inhibitor on it, or mixed into it. The appearance of the cheese itself is quite uniform. It's quite a close textured paste. So, you know, I like that. There are no fissures or cracks.
Yeah, it's very uniform. It's very sort of clean, correct, and as Bronwyn said, on the outside, it's very it's looked after well. It's very clean. I'd expect to see maybe some sort of mold formation or something growing on the outside, but there isn't.
Hey.
Aroma, it's quite muted for me at the moment. I'm having to put it quite close to my nose to get much from it. It's not a bad thing. It's just I was possibly, from looking at it, expecting to get a bit more from the nose.
Yeah, it's quite fresh. You know, it's quite pale as well. I'm trying to sort of classify what I think this cheese is. In some ways, it's telling me it's a cheddar, but in other ways, there's something about the appearance of it, the kind of texture when it was scraped under the knife that doesn't seem as sort of it's a little less waxy than I would expect a cheddar to be. So I'm very interested for when we're ultimately going to taste it to see what it's doing.
I agree, and I'm very disobedient. I've already tasted it, but I think it's exactly the same thought process. Is it a cheddar or is it a very sort of territorial? From looking at it, I wasn't quite sure. And exactly as you scrape it under the paste, it wasn't holding together like I thought it would if it was a cheddar. So what is it?
No, I mean, in my mind, this is definitely not a cheddar. And again, we're not judging it on whether it's a cheddar or not, but in terms of like thinking about this as a cheese, my inability to really classify it is puzzling me, which is interesting.
I think it's brilliant. I think that's brilliant that you guys don't know what it is just until you know dive in and taste it. So
the texture is quite bitty. Yeah, the texture is quite bitty. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel cheddary, and it has quite a bright acidity. So again, I'm gonna classify this as a territorial and say that I like it. It's quite gentle. It's fresh. It's lactic. It's doing a lot of things that I would expect that style of cheese to do.
Yeah, exactly that. It feels like a sort of a slightly firmer territorial than I was expecting. It's sort of a hybrid texture, which is really throwing me off. But those flavor profiles, that high acidity, that sort of real mouth-watering, buttery, slightly lactic cold vibe is sort of talking Lancashire, but I'm not quite sure. It's lovely. It's very it's subtle. So aroma and translating into the flavor as well, it is subtle. It feels quite restrained in what it's doing. I haven't got anything hugely off in flavor, but at all.
No, I think, you know, if we're looking at faults, I would say it's faults are absent in terms of, you know, is it super memorable? I'm not sure that it's really as complex maybe, or I don't know, multi-dimensional as a cheese that I would be thinking about, you know, tomorrow or the next day, having tasted it right now. But it's good. It's very accomplished, and you know, hopefully it's doing what it set out to do, which is an important part of this whole thing.
Yeah, agreed.
And in terms of usage of this cheese? Would you see it on a cheese board? Would you see it? Where would you kind of position it?
It's an
Just throwing it
interesting.
out there.
I mean, I think from my mind, British territorials were never created to sit on a cheese board. I mean, occasionally if you ultra mature something until it's, you know, a year old and super strong, you can just about get away with putting them on a cheese board. But to my mind, this, you know, this style of cheese would probably be something that would be either an eating cheese where you're going to have some bread and some cheese and some butter, maybe some chutney for your lunch, or to cook with. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with cooking with cheese. I think it's brilliant.
It's the best thing to
I
cook
agree.
with.
I think it would make an absolutely phenomenal toasty. And also, yeah, cooking with it for sure. I don't think anyone should ever hold back on using the best cheeses for cooking. We always use the best ingredients for what we're doing. So cooking with the best cheeses is the way to go as well.
Agreed. So let's dive into scoring on appearance.
I mean, I think for an artisan cheese made from the farm's own milk, I'm happy with a little bit more rusticity. So I'm going to mark down slightly for the fact that they're, you know, that it's got a plastic rind with no mold on it. But it's not a fault. So I would maybe give it like a 6.5, 7. What do you think, Emma?
I agree. I mean, yes, it is not showing any faults or anything wrong, but it is very clinical. And I agree, it would be nice to see maybe slightly more character coming through from the actual cheese. I think 6.5. Yeah, 6.5.
Okay. So aroma.
So as I was saying earlier, it's quite muted. You have to put it really close, but it is a territorial style, we think. So you're not expecting a massive whack of aroma. What does come is clean, correct, slightly sort of lactic-y, buttery notes coming through, a tiny bit of charcuterie on the end. It's pleasant.
Yeah. What do you think? 7?
7, yeah, 7.
Onto texture.
I think it's appropriate for what it is, in terms of it's got that kind of friability, crumbliness. It's fairly moist. My one criticism would be, I wonder if it's a little bit, there's something a little bit sludgy about the texture when I crush it between my fingers. A tiny, it's not sticky, but it's heading in that direction. And I feel like I'd like something that's just a bit kind of fluffier and lighter and a little bit. And I wonder if part of that has to do with the way that it's been aged and maybe holding in some of that moisture. I mean, I'm guessing here, but for me, I would maybe mark it down slightly for that slight stodginess.
Agreed. Just ever so slightly pasty, and I do want a bit more of that fluffy, airy kind of guise to happen also.
Okay.
So what? Yeah.
And then finally flavor, guys.
Flavor wise, it is it's doing a good job. It is subtle, it's gentle. We're expecting subtle, gentle from the style. There are no faults in flavor. I quite like the acidity. I do like that slightly charcuterie vibe at the end of it, which I wasn't expecting in this kind of style. It has got something a little bit more sort of not animal, but something a bit wilder than just the generic, we're going to pigeonhole into this. So I quite like the flavor.
Yeah, I'm happy. Should we, I mean, I would agree with all of that. It's all very correct. It's just not super memorable for me. I might give it, I don't know, 7?
7, yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Thank you, guys. So the next cheese we're going to move on to is J1 1078. And we're already at 10 o'clock.
Well, we had some prep time in there too, so hopefully
We're good. We're going to get off flow. Look, here we go.
J1,
brilliant, guys.
Code.
Thank you. That looks gorgeous, actually.
Ooh, it does look gorgeous.
What a beauty. What an aroma as well. So, yeah, first impressions, yum. Want to eat straight away. Maybe turn the video off and go and have this for lunch. Yeah, beautiful blue. You can see the veining in, yeah, mine looks, I think I've got like darker lighting in here, but the veining is beautiful. It's very marbled in look. Quite a nice sort of ivory coloured paste. The rind looks very well looked after.
I couldn't agree more. I think it looks pretty textbook. I would say Stilton style cheese.
Yeah, The aromas coming off it from unwrapping, no massive whack in the face of ammonia, which could happen. It smells really sort of cereal biscuity. You have got blue, textbook sort of blue aromas in there too, but it smells lovely.
I agree. And on the appearance, yeah, no, just it's got a very nice sheen to it in terms of that breakdown. It's broken down, but it's not like gluey textured, which sometimes, you know, cheese or gummy, which I think is very nice. Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not going to stop you diving in because I don't think I'd get a chance to do that. So make me jealous.
I think we might on this one.
Yes.
It's lovely. So it cuts really nicely. It's got a sort of almost a fudgy texture when you cut it, but you can see when you manipulate it with your fingers, it's got a crumble to it also. It's him.
It's got quite a nice sort of freshness balanced with the blue and the savoriness from the blue that's coming through. And there's even though the paste is fully broken down, there's an almost fluffiness behind the smoothness, which I think is quite mouth-watering and quite sort of satisfying to eat. So yeah, I'm really liking this.
Me too. So yeah, exactly what Bronwyn said. And the flavor, where we were talking about one of the other cheeses being sort of correct and clean and very simple in flavor, this is going in many different directions, many layers. It's got a lovely acidity, but it's also cereal. I've got some really interesting sort of vegetal notes. I'm thinking some sort of soup that my mum's made with leeks, or I don't know. There's loads of really fun things happening in here. It is very good.
And the other thing I would say is that even though there's quite a lot of, the blue is very well established, you can clearly see this is a blue cheese. Even when you taste a piece with a fair amount of blue in it, it's not gritty on your tongue. So I'm like, that is a real kind of showstopper blue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, textbook. It's delicious. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Sarah, you got here just the right moment.
Hello. How's it going?
Really well right now. This is delicious. It's a very well showing cheese right now. It's a good time to dot in.
Okay, so appearance, ladies, what are we going to go with?
I mean, it's hard for me to imagine improving on that. I would go, I don't know, 9? Is that too generous?
No, I was thinking 9 too. I'm trying to think what 9. Let's go 9.
I'm gonna challenge you and throw it back and say what would make it a 10? Yeah, absolutely.
What would make it a 10? I mean, you're getting into the realm of like, can cheeses physically do these things?
Put it this way, the way you've reacted to it this morning, I'm just pushing back and going, does it deserve it?
Okay, if we're going to be really picky, there is a slight halo, slight sort of dark patch around the outside, and the rind is slightly powdery, and that I think that's they're supposed to be like that. But Bronwyn, what do you think?
I agree. If I were going to go from my like absolute best edition of Stilton that I've ever seen in my life, you can see how that has a really beautiful coppery kind of tone on the bottom, but on the side of the cheese here, it is quite white and powdery, and I'd love to see a little bit more copper on the perimeter of the rind. That balance of bacteria and mold, and this to me is just a little bit mold dominated.
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you for clarifying, guys. I love it. Aroma.
I think it's good. I think, it's important to note that there is going to be ammonia in any blue cheese aroma. But the thing for me here is that it is in balance with those, as Emma says, kind of lactic, biscuity, kind of cheese aromas. And so, I think it's great.
I do too. I'm sitting maybe more at about an 8 for that, more than a 9. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I think it's the place where it really shines is how it looks, and then also how it tastes.
Yeah.
In that case, I'm just going to whack you into texture quickly.
Texture? Oh, I mean, I think for me, the texture's a 9. It's got a
The texture
really,
is
really
fabulous. Absolutely textbook. We've given you all the descriptors already. It's yeah, I'm a 9 as well.
The thing that really sets the texture apart for me is that it's structurally sound and yet it's utterly melting. And I think that is a really difficult balance to achieve, and this cheese does it really well.
Okay, so
Agreed.
again, I'm going to push it back on you. Where's that other mark?
If it were just a little tiny bit more buttery. You know, sometimes people talk about the texture of a perfectly ripe Stilton having this like butter that you've taken out of the refrigerator and put on the counter, and it's just absolutely like weightless. I think this is nearing that, but it doesn't, to me, like it could take it one step further. That would be the 10.
Agreed.
Okay, and then finally flavor.
Oh, I mean, yeah. How bold are we? What's wrong with it? Let's go straight
What's
into
wrong with it? What's wrong with it? Because
bring-
it's really, really good. What's wrong with it? I would say I'd like a little more savory, I'd like a little more sweet, and I'd like a little more caramel. And part of me wonders whether if you kept this cheese for another month and kept maturing it, whether it would get there, and whether that's just a function of when the cheesemaker has decided to cut and sell this cheese. I think it could go a little more va-va-voom, being the same cheese as it is, and just pushed a little bit further.
I think so too. I think that there's it's almost sort of like a rounding of the edges that can be happened with that sort of sweet caramel note. It is insanely complex, really, really delicious. It's got all of these big, bold, brash flavors, but just a tiny bit of that rounding would get it even, I mean, into top marks. But I think we're still on a very high one right now, aren't we?
Yeah,
nine and a half.
Yeah, go for it. 9.5.
9.5.
Because I think it's all there. I think it's just like it's you know, that the cheese has that potential.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you know that I'm going to push you just to define it. Going to move on to the next cheese then, guys. J1 1080.
All right.
And save me that.
Yeah, I wish I could, because I'll put it back in the post to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is 1080.
Perfect. Thank you.
That is lunch so far. That one is my lunch.
Yeah, that's lunchable. Yeah.
Delish. This one's looking really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've switched back to another hard cheese. So we've gone blue hard so far, really keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, you're not making this easy for us. All right. So we got a cheese here, very, very even texture. Little bit different on either the top or the bottom than the other side. Just a little more open, not quite gas bubbles, but slightly on one side of it. Black rind, looks like another Plasticoat one.
Yeah, it's incredibly dense. So that when you're scraping it, not much cheese comes off at all. It is a very sort of dense, slightly almost waxy texture.
But it feels moist as well. What I would say is,
Yeah.
as I'm scraping it, my knife isn't skipping over the top of it as if it, like some of the really dry cheeses, you can't even scrape. This feels like it's still alive.
Yeah, agreed. And it's not going powdery when you scrape it as well, which can happen on some.
Yeah.
So yeah, appearance wise, yeah, very sort of uniform, caramelly looking. Bronwyn's mentioned the bubbles. In aroma, it's coming through in a very sort of sweet, again, caramel butterscotch, guys, immediately into sort of Werther's Original, other sweets are available kind of smell.
Absolutely. Quite attractive.
Yeah. So it's very sort of one nose though. There isn't a lot of complexity on the nose, but it's a very pleasant one. Oh, it's dense. Okay.
You're going to serve this on your cheese board. You'd want to equip your guests with some kind of leverage and a big knife.
So texture wise, when you're sort of mashing it between your fingers, it's quite difficult. It's a good workout. But it does still have that moisture within.
It
Not
feels
much.
like it's just beginning to break down to me. There's still a fair amount of curdiness in there, which, you know, it is breaking down, but, you know, it would concern me in a cheese of this size if it was still that curdy so far along. You've got a little bit of, you got a challenge to get that fully breaking down by the time, you know, and ripe before it dries out.
Yeah, agreed. I've gone in already for flavor. It's doing exactly what it says on the aroma. So it's a very sort of clean, sweet but not overly sweet, sort of milk, caramelized, milky kind of milk sweetness, not over confectionery, which is quite lovely.
I agree. Based on the smell, I was maybe fearing that it would be something very candy-like and a little bit kind of painted on, but actually the impression when you're eating it is a lot more savory than that, with just those kind of aromatic caramel overtones, but not like sweetness on my tongue, which I'm gonna give it some credit for, because you know, if you're gonna make a cheese that's from your own farm, I think you don't want to just make it a bit of a kind of paint by number kind of a operation.
I'm salivating, guys. This is just my kind of cheese. So
I'm ready to score if you are, Bronwyn.
Yeah, good. Let's go for it.
okay, appearance.
I mean, I like the uniformity of it. I like the kind of translucency. When you hold it up to the light, you can kind of see it glowing. I like that element of it. To be honest, I don't really like the plastic coat. I don't think it does the cheese justice. It feels like if it had a natural rind, I might be inclined to kind of just, I want to say respect it a little bit more, but do you know what I mean?
Completely. I think it detracts away from it slightly. It also just doesn't look very good. It feels a little bit more commercial. It detracts away from it slightly. The paste itself looks very uniform. I have got a bit of a dark halo around the perimeter of the cheese as well. But it's textbook sort of uniform, dense in the middle. I think maybe sort of 6 for appearance, 6 or a bit more. Is that harsh?
Let's go 6.5. Let's go
6.5. Yeah.
Okay, aroma.
I'm actually getting more from it the second or fifth, sixth time of smelling it. There's a bit more of a sort of tropical fruit element coming through, as well as that initial caramel that I got.
Yeah.
But it's pleasant. It is it's not a huge nose, but it's nice what it's doing.
Yeah. What do you think? 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Texture, I think I have some quips with. I think it is a little bit, as Bronwyn and I both demonstrated, harder to cut. It has got quite a lot of it's pushing back at us slightly when we're trying to mold it. It is pushing back. It has a bit of that sort of curdy element that is slightly detracting away from those lovely flavors and aromas which are coming through.
I think it's a bit too hard. I think it's a bit too low moisture. I think it's designed. If that cheese were 3 times as big, I think you might end up with something that was ripening all the way through without drying out.
Yeah.
But as it is, it feels like it's too dry for the size. And it really, like, I think it could achieve more if you want to go for that really firm texture in a different format. So I think I agree. I'm going to mark it down a little on texture as well.
Okay.
Where are you sitting?
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.
6, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, flavor, guys.
It is showing, as we've explained, it's not showing enormous amounts of complexity, but what it's doing, it does nicely. It does it well. I would like a bit more coming from that flavor, and I think that many of the attributes we've already mentioned are contributing to it not giving that extra flavor. So for me, it's sitting as a very, very well made, good flavored cheese with no faults, but it's not giving us the wow factor, not giving me the wow factor. I'm not speaking for you.
No. I think you've summed it up. It's like, it's really, really good, but I want more va-va-voom. I wish it had a bit more to say. I love the fact that it's not like candy sweet and just confected, but I still don't feel like I know what it's trying to say to me.
Yeah. Where are you sitting? Like 7?
7. Let's give it a 7.
7. Okay, perfect.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. Next cheese is J1 1094.
Great.
And give this a bit of a scrape too. It wasn't backpack, but it just had a little bit of plastic around it, and I think it will be happier for being
I was
faced.
going to say, whatever you can do to make it shine.
Or not shine, as the case.
Or not shine at all, yeah. This one.
Yeah.
So it's it feels quite dry scraping it. It's got almost a bit of that powder that we mentioned on one of the previous cheeses. So scraping it, it isn't coming off in cheesy folds. It's breaking up and it's a bit bitty.
Yeah, and you can almost feel that there's some crystals going on in there. You know, I'm thinking that this isn't just about dryness, it's also about crystallization, which is interesting.
So visually, I mean, it's a plastic coated hard cheese in the shape of a sort of Gouda-ish type thing. We don't really know what style it is trying to emulate right now, but from appearance, that's what it looks like, but it's very firm. So very, very firm.
Yeah, very firm, very even, a fair amount of halo if we're looking at that drying aspect of it, which suggests to me that it's probably quite, you know, quite mature, quite aged. It will be interesting to see how the flavor and the texture are as you get towards that, you know, whether there's a diminution of quality as we're getting towards the edge.
Agreed. Aroma wise, I've got a tiny bit of a smoky element coming off it. Like
I was going to say the same, but sort of when you mentioned charcuterie earlier, then that word popped back into my mind, and maybe that's that smoky element.
Yeah, but also something. I've got like sort of baked potato. There's something with like potatoey vegetal, but also slightly smoky on it. It's an interesting nose. It's intriguing. It's quite restrained and subtle, but there's something that's attracting me in.
Yeah. No, and interestingly, when you start to look at the texture, you know, the first impression when we were scraping it was quite dry and crystalline, but there's actually quite a lot of moisture in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's quite giving.
Yeah. There's your crystals. It's almost it's very granular, so every bite has a crystal. It's not like some cheeses where you get the occasional crunch. This is like the crunch is an integral part of this style.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's so interesting because that's not crystallization down to dryness. That's crystallization that's down to the choice of a starter culture that, you know, that catalyzes the formation of these particular crystals from, you know, from the paste of the cheese, from the lactate.
Yeah.
So it's very you know, it's like this paradox of like, here are the crystals, and then there's this very kind of smooth melting paste as well, which, you know, again, I think it's a compelling style. I know why this is one that is like the gateway to the world of cheese. Yeah, it's yummy.
Yep.
I'm getting a little bit of, and you can tell me if you disagree here, Emma, a little bit of kind of metallic bitterness on the back of my palate once I've swallowed it, that there's just something that's sitting there. And I don't know if that's, I've had it before on other Gouda style cheeses, particularly aged ones, where I don't know if that's a side effect of the nitrate that's used in it or some other element, but it leaves me feeling a bit bitter and metallic on my palate.
I think definitely the metallic side for me, and then because I'm getting that metallic, I'm wondering whether it's slightly psychosomatic for me on the bitter. I didn't get the bitter initially, but definitely that sort of metallic. Is it going to go into something else? It's definitely making me salivate more in acidity, but I haven't quite got a bitter on it. But metallic for sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Oh, all right. Are we ready to jump in?
Do
Are
it.
you ready?
So appearance wise, I think for me, it's very uniform. It's the plastic coat is clean. It has got an enormous halo, which is quite distracting for me. It's really, really deep into the cheese. It's not just around the outside. It sort of goes into about here.
Yeah.
And it is slightly powdery to the touch. So when you scrape it, it is coming off a bit in a powder, which is a bit distracting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's good, but I think that there are those elements where I would just knock it a little bit. I mean, are you thinking sort of 7, 6.5?
I'm happy with 6.5 or 7. Maybe we be nicer and give 7.
Yeah.
let's be nice. Yeah.
And then aroma. I like the aroma, actually. I think the aroma might be my favorite part of it in terms of it really jumps out at you. It's got a lot of, as you said, like a lot of very interesting sort of savory, smoky elements that I think are really nice. So
Yeah.
I would go 8 on aroma
I
personally.
think the aroma is lovely. I'm really intrigued by it. If I smelt that in a cheese, I would want to taste it. I keep going back to smell it. It's very, very pleasing. I agree. 8.
Lovely. Texture.
Texture is slightly trickier for me because we've got so many textures. Which texture are we grading? So we've got that sort of to the touch, it's firm, it's dense, and straight away in the palate it is granular, which isn't bad. It's supposed to be there as part of the style, and people love the crunch. It does have a bit of give, and it does break down quite nicely in the mouth. But there's so many different textures. I think as an overall, I like it, but it's not my favorite texture.
No,
Is that because it causes almost like a battle?
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, I like the solubility of it. I like how it breaks down on my tongue. I'm not sure I like those little crystals in there as part of that soluble kind of experience, I guess.
I think that's what makes it confusing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Confusing. Great. Confusing.
I mean, it sounds like a 7 to me.
7, yeah. 7.
7 it is, guys. And finally, the flavor.
Now, this is, again, one of these places where there are elements of it that I really like. I like the savoriness. I like the directness. You don't have to work for it to give you a real flavor hit, but I really have to mark for that metallic finish. To me, it kind of, like, I think I would really, there's a lot I would enjoy about this cheese, but that finish really takes it away from me. So I would have to mark it down to probably personally around a 6, just on the basis of that metallicness.
So, I mean, yes, for the metallic side, but also for me, I think that it could go even further in its flavor and complexity. So I think it is holding back a bit, tied in with that metallic guys as well. I agree. Yeah, let's go with that.
Hey, thank you, ladies.
The aroma is so good that I keep smelling it. I keep going back to smell it. It's really lovely.
Hang it on your rearview mirror, right?
Okay, we're looking at J1 1095 next, please.
9.5 or 9.8?
9.5.
Okay, sorry.
9.8 is the next one.
Okay.
Oh,
I like.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. There's something very. It looks like a tum. Like, you know, if someone told me that was a tum de Savoie or something, I would be like, yeah, it looks really, really like a nice version. Super, super kind of patted down mucor rind, nice and thin, really kind of flossy texture. It's in great condition.
I agree. This is one of my favorite styles of cheese, having worked with lots of sort of French companies and French cheeses. This is something that I really am enamored by. And actually last week at the Brazilian Cheese Awards, the cheese I championed was a style like this. It is something that I'm really, really passionate about. The flavors are usually a little bit on the more sort of restrained, subtle, elegant side, and I really am looking forward to tasting this. As Bronwyn said, on the appearance, it's beautifully presented. The mucor's been looked after perfectly. That I don't have any damp patches anywhere. It looks great too. And the aroma's coming off. It's nice.
Fabulous cellar.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So aromas, textbook sort of champignon, like mushroomy aromas, earthy cave. tiny bit of ammonia, which you'd expect on it, but there's nothing completely distracting at this point. It smells enticing.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Let's do it.
These holes are normal, by the way. I know in certain cultures, there's lots of, are these holes okay? Is this supposed to be part of it? This is sort of pretty standard for a style like this. Bronwyn, do you think there's too many, or?
No, I mean, would you
Yeah.
think those are mechanical holes? They look like it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, I think it's fine. I think I like it. It's
Oh.
Well, that's an interesting face, Emma.
So with this style as well, Bronwyn asked earlier about would you eat the rind on the blue? Age-old question for styles like this, do you or not? You don't have to. I really do think it adds an extra dimension to the cheese. Sometimes if they haven't been looked after beautifully, you can get a bit of bitterness, a bit of sort of metallic off flavors. I, again, just went straight in because I'm a pig.
Yes.
The texture and the flavor of the actual paste, it's buttery. It is it's very simple in its flavor. I was expecting a tiny bit more.
I know, I completely agree. It's fresh, it's lactic, it's super plain. And I feel like this is the, you know, the challenge for this sort of brilliant style of very unadorned cheese is that if your milk, you know, if your milk is just super clean, you know, and by clean, I mean, like, if the milk isn't, if the milk doesn't have something to say, you can end up with something that's a little bit bland. I love so much about this cheese, and it's letting me down a little bit in, you know, in the flavor, which is making me sad because
I know,
really,
me too.
really want to love it.
I guess that's the good thing about these competitions is as much as we really, really wanted to and had preconceptions of it, really wanted to love it, unfortunately, it's not quite delivering exactly what we wanted right now, but it can do. It definitely can do.
It definitely can. And I just feel like, you know, it might not be a cheese making tweak because to be honest, my feeling is that cheese making is pretty spot on. It's like technically excellent. There's nothing I would improve about that. I want to turn up the character, and I don't mean turn up the character by going and finding a different starter culture. Go and turn up the character by like looking at the farming. These people have their own animals. If they are entering in this, look at the farming, look at what you're doing. How can you boost the character of that milk in a way that really gives this cheese the opportunity to sing? Because it is so exciting, that like format and what you've delivered in terms of the package.
I also just said affinage, but I completely take it back because the mucor was perfect. That everything's perfect about it. There could possibly, I was going to say a bit more breakdown, but it's not that at all. So exactly what Bronwyn said. I can't wait to try this again though.
No, completely. And you know, this is my feeling, like for a cheese like this to be kind of as exciting as of like a kind of big in your face blue cheese, I think is really, really saying something. And I just feel like if this can deliver everything it has the potential for, I'm so there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. And you know what, guys, this is what is so brilliant about the Virtual Cheese Awards is that cheesemaker, whoever they are, is getting that feedback which they wouldn't normally get. And the fact that you guys are so excited and passionate about it, I'm really grateful. Let's score it and start with appearance.
9.
Beautiful, absolutely stunning. 9 without a doubt. If we had to make it down on anything, which is where Cara keeps pushing us, which is really nice, possibly a tiny bit more breakdown, a little bit more given in appearance, but it is very, very beautiful.
Is it a 9.5 then rather than a 9?
Yeah, let's give it a 9.5.
It's a 9.5. Yeah.
Okay. Aroma?
I mean 9.5. I love it.
It's giving I'm in the middle of a lovely cave in France and having a lovely time vibe. So that, but done in the UK with different aromas there, the mushroom, the lactic acidity, the everything. I love it. The aroma is going up in my car alongside that last cheese. I'm hanging them as my air freshener.
Lovely. Texture, guys.
I mean, it's right up there. I feel like maybe it's slightly hard work. It's a little bit, like a tiny bit stodgy, I want something a little lighter, not a lot. It's not far off. I mean, 8.5.
8.5 for sure. It is yeah, just a tiny bit more give, and that would be up there in the 9.5 zone.
But like, it's still really, really, really good. Yeah.
And finally, flavour.
So I am very much enjoying the sort of the freshness, the acidity, all of the sort of the base of the style that we're expecting. The only unfortunate part is that it doesn't go to that next level, which is where both Bronwyn and I really were so excited about this, and it is a very good baseline, just that extra bit of complexity, and we'd be marrying it straight away, I think.
Completely. Yeah. And I have to like add, the rind tastes great as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's
no bitter. Yeah.
The aroma of the cellar and the mushrooms, like the rind tastes great. And so like, yeah, what Emma said. 7?
Yeah. We're very upset to give this 7, just so you know. I don't think I can go, and I can't go higher than 7. It's everything else is absolutely spot on, but to be fair on all the cheeses in this competition, we can't really go any further with that flavor profile. But oh my goodness, please enter again, and we can't wait to know what it is.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is 1098. Ooh, looking quite similar.
1098. Maybe that's just the camera. We'll give it a bit of a scrape, but this looks more along a sort of a hard sort of cheddary alpine type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite golden and very, very dense.
Yeah, the rind is quite dark. It's got a tiny bit of a damp patch on the outside on mine. I'm not sure if you've got one, but just here it looks a little bit darker and slightly damp. Is yours?
Yeah.
Is yours behaving?
There is a sort of like waxiness to the outside, which is, and yeah, it's interesting because it feels like such a dry cheese. To have that dampness is interesting.
And it's also strangely kind of gone into the paste. I don't know how much you can see this, but mine is starting to flake off. I am going to make a mess, but just around the outside, mine has started to flake off a bit and slightly eat into the paste, which I wasn't expecting from first looks. But is yours behaving better?
No. Mine is also quite flaky on the rind. You know, it reminds me of some of these kind of Cantal cheeses where the rind is almost its own thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this rind is much, much thinner than that, but there's still there's a thickness and a presence about it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's the day of very firm, hard cheeses.
With my 99p knife, whilst all my knives are in storage when I'm moving house, I'm gonna just eat them soon. Aromas really. Sorry, what are we looking at first? Appearance. Yeah, so we've mentioned the rind. I think the paste itself is very sort of uniform, slightly very compact, a little bit dense when you're scraping it, though it does still have that moisture within it, so it's not going into a powder. A few sort of dotted crystals throughout. I like the sort of deep golden color.
Yep. Ever so slightly waxy. But it's interesting as I'm pressing it between my fingers. It's clearly quite a dry cheese, but it's broken down. It's no longer curdy. Yeah. You can feel that the enzymes within it have completely digested the paste, which I think is a good thing. That suggests to me that this cheese is ripe.
Right.
I love the aroma. I think it's got loads and loads of projection.
Projection's a great shout. And also, yeah, where others I've commented on having to really put it quite close to your nose to get anything happening. Opening this straight out the paper, I could smell the rind, giving it a scrape. The paste is coming through. There's something a little bit, I've got some really interesting aromas of sort of tropical, but also something really dark and umami and savory at the same time.
Like chocolatey.
Yeah.
No,
that's a lovely nose.
Very, yeah, the full spectrum.
So texture-wise in the palate, it is it's smooth but ever so slightly bitty. So it's tiny bits are breaking into, not powdery, but it's breaking down in a less homogeneous way than I was expecting.
I would even say there's a little element of slight, like slight powderiness there.
Okay.
You know, and again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But
It doesn't feel like it's distracting away right now. It's just at this stage, just a comment where I was expecting it to be a little bit more uniform, but yeah, it's not a problem.
No.
It's very deep, isn't it? Very sort of deep, rich, dark umami. You said cacao,
long,
chocolate.
long flavor. Yeah, I think, and really, really settled. There's nothing in there that's setting me on edge.
Not at all, and that's a really nice thing in this category, especially where it's sort of showing the milk from one's own herd. I think it's really coming through in that respect, where you can taste it is not just a recipe here. There is a lot more going on than just some cheese making skill, which is great that it comes through.
Totally.
Alrighty.
Shall we give it a go? So appearance.
Mine is really flaky on the rind, so I will have to mark it down there. Every single piece is sort of like coming off into grated bits. It is peeling completely.
It does feel like it's shedding slightly, and it's interesting. There's sort of, yeah. I mean, there's an element of that rusticity that I kind of like. It's a bit sort of like hewn from the mountain, but yeah, maybe a little less shedding would be nice.
Shedding is so accurate. I think it's not the worst thing in the world. However, if I agree on the rusticity, but it is because it's encroaching in the paste for me. That's the only reason that I think I will have to bring it down slightly. But the paste looks lovely, nice and uniform. 7.5.
7,
Yeah. 7.
Aroma, guys. You said you loved it.
Aroma's delicious. Up there.
9.
9. Yeah.
Really, really good.
Texture.
I think it's good. I think it is, I mean, where I give it credit is it's a super dry cheese that it has completely broken down and is like releasing the flavor, and it's not hard work to eat it.
Really clever though.
It's very clever. Possibly a tiny bit more given, a tiny bit less of the powdery, even though it's not a fault. I think if it was slightly more homogeneous, and it may get it even further.
I think loosening it up a little bit, maybe accepting that, like, and again, I don't know. There's a lot of risk when you introduce a little more moisture to a cheese, when you don't, heat it and beat it quite so hard. But I do feel like maybe just relaxing a little bit on the dryness element of it will either allow it to break down and release those flavors a bit earlier, or increase those amount of flavors when they do get there. So yeah, I think maybe marking it down a little bit for that denseness and stodginess. What do you think?
Yeah, not loads though. I think sort of 8, 7.5, 8.
7.5.
7.5, yeah. Fine.
And finally, the flavor.
The flavor is very good.
It's great. There's so much complexity within it. The aromas translate into the flavor. There aren't any off notes at all. I'm really intrigued. It has layers. Exactly as I said earlier, it really does give a sort of sense of this cheese maker and not just a standard recipe of a cheese. You can feel a bit more happening, and you can taste a lot more there. I think the flavor's delicious. I'm up there in sort of 9.
Yeah, I was gonna say 8.5 or 9.
8.5, 8.5, 9. I'm sure. Where do you want an 8.5 it?
Come on, be kind, guys. It's a Friday.
How does that make a difference? I'm meaner on a Friday.
We're generous on Fridays.
I know.
8.5.
Yeah, 8.5. I think it's really, really good, and I can imagine it like easily being even more. So let's do 8.5.
I think that's it. We know that it feels like there's room for it being even better.
Brilliant.
But it's a very, very, very good cheese that's going on lunch board.
Definitely.
Lovely. Then we are now on to J1 1100.
This one looks
Gonna grab a paper towel.
a little bit of a similar rind, a little bit lighter.
Oh wait, yeah. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you.
Give this a little scrape as well. This one feels like it has a lot more sort of moisture and youth in it.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely the youth. The rind, where I mean, it looks slightly plastic coated, and whereas we saw earlier on was really, really sort of clinical and clean, there is a bit more action going on my one at least anyway, which is good.
Thinner, more under control.
Yep. I'm going to proper hack into the middle of this one. I mean, as you've seen on the camera, I have been, this is not to Bronwyn or you, chorus, to the audience, but it hacking in just so I can really get into the core of it, because it does feel like the outside is, it's been wrapped and it's traveled, and I want to give it this full sort of benefit of the doubt.
That's fair enough.
Do you mind holding that up, Emma, just to
Which bit? The cheese?
where you cut it, the side that you cut it, so we can see.
I've kind of hacked it. Sorry, this is not my textbook. Retail skills with my little knife, but I just basically cut a massive wedge in to get to the core of the cheese, just to make sure that no influence from the packaging or oxidization or my mum's fridge or anything like that is influencing it. So I'm in the middle. It's very firm. It's a lot firmer than I thought when cutting it. So
I agree. Scraping it told me it was going to be softer than when I was cutting through.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The aroma's quite restrained as well. It's got aromas sort of reminiscent of those sort of caramel cooked, sweet, almost alpine aromas. I was not expecting that at all on this nose. I was thinking of going more down a sort of cheddar, grassy hay line, but it's smelling very sort of alpine.
It was very interesting. Wait until you taste it. It's very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, how different it is from a cheddar.
What is this?
I'm finding the flavor quite toppy, quite high, and there's a real there's a real burn.
Yeah, it is. It's itchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in a way I would have expected, say, like the older cheese to be the one that was going in that direction, but in a way it feels like this younger cheese, which has a lot more well, probably because it has a lot more of that kind of moisture in it, is going quite itchy. And again, maybe this is the risk when you do make a cheese with more moisture. You risk it going in these unintended directions. Now, I know that some people love an itchy hard cheese. Personally, I find it a little bit abrasive on my tongue, and I would shy away from that for myself. But again, that's a matter of taste. I will probably mark down for it. Even though there's some customers who would definitely search that out as a preference. So that's just
agreed. I think if we're talking sort of technically, it is it's not like a major fault, but it is something that we will mark down on, and absolutely there are customers who like that. But from judging it in a competition like this, it is definitely something that we wouldn't want to be in this cheese in such a quantity. I also find that for a cheese to have gone this way in what looks to be young-ish, not old and aged like some of the others, it's a very premature time for this to have occurred. So I wonder whether this is a cheese which, I don't know if it's sold in different ages, how it would have been a bit younger, but for now it's showing some of these sort of volatile, itchy notes, which aren't amazingly pleasant right now.
Yeah, and I feel like that sometimes the trade-off for when you're getting those is that like an immense flavor, but actually I don't feel like the other flavors are so developed around it.
Agreed.
To make up for it.
Agreed. Cool. Okay, so appearance-wise, I
think nice.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's nice. It's got a good looking appearance. I like that there is a tiny bit. Well, it is plastic coated again, isn't it? Yeah, it's 7.5.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Looks nice, glossy.
Yep.
Lovely aroma.
It is restrained. I've cut into the center of this cheese, so there is no influence from the packaging or anything else. I'm still having to put it right up to my nose, and yeah.
What's there? I completely agree with you. It doesn't jump out like some of the other cheeses have, but what's there is nice.
It is, yeah.
White, fruity, tropical, pineapple-y, like I like the spectrum that the aroma is operating in, but I agree with you. It's much more close.
Yeah. And I agree on the flavors. The tropical sort of elements are exactly what I'm smelling, sort of pineapple notes, which is very pleasant.
Mm.
What do you want to give it?
Sorry, can I just question you a little bit, guys? At the beginning, you said the aromas are quite restrained, caramel and sweet alpine like. Are you saying the further you've gone in, it becomes more citrusy and
So still alpine, so in the alpine element of that tropical, so not so much citrus, but when you get sort of like a French or Swiss alpine style cheese, you get a lot of tropical elements. So it's still continued. The sweetness is still there, so it's very much the same, just we've given you different words. Sorry.
Totally.
No,
Yeah, no, I think those are very compatible descriptors.
Thank you.
Sorry,
what
what were we doing?
What are we scoring it at?
So aroma wise,
Yeah.
I think it's like a 7. It's nice. What's there is nice. I would love a little more, but I think it's a good aroma. Would you say 7 and a half?
7.5 maybe, because what we are smelling we do like. There could be slightly more complexity and it could be dialed up in aroma for what we think in this age. So yeah, 7.5.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Texture.
I like the texture.
Yeah, wasn't what I was expecting at all. The texture is nice. It's verging on a sort of an alpine style as well, where you've got a bit more of that waxy in a positive way, not in a bad way. So that sort of waxy, dense texture. It's firm, it's toothsome.
Yeah. But again, it's fully broken down. It's not curdy anymore. It feels at ease with being sold right now. So I do like the texture. I would say 8 on texture.
8, I think, is good. Yeah.
Lovely. And finally, the flavor, please, guys.
Right. Yeah, go.
I think I found the flavor slightly too toppy and not balanced with the itch. So I would probably give that a 6.5.
I think that's very fair. It is it feels a bit out of balance, and to exactly just to reiterate what Bronwyn was saying in terms of those slightly itchier, high acid, brash, aggressive flavors need to have something to match up to that to make them less prevalent. I think that's a very fair score.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Okay. Next cheese is 1130, please.
1130.
Mm-hmm.
Give me one sec. What do I do? Yeah, sorry. 1130 here. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh.
Another smoky one.
Yeah. Smoky. What? This is a very interesting nose. I haven't scraped it yet at all, but there's so much happening already. There's sort of like a wild, almost fermenty, again in a good way. Some of these words may be taken in a negative way. I will always say when they're positive. I like that wild, fermenty, sort of herbaceous, smoky, slightly animal. I'm intrigued.
Be interesting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. And
to find ourselves in a world of blend correctness just because we've marked down everything that might be divisive, and that's always the challenge with judging cheese.
absolutely. This is, I've said it about 97 times already, but a very, very exciting category to see all of this different diversity, but just how all of the different farms and the different sort of personalities can come through in cheese and not just as a recipe. And this is very much drawing me in already, this one.
Yes. There's something when you're scraping the surface, there's something very nice about the way that it's just kind of spreading a little bit. Like there's a givingness about the paste that I like.
So appearance wise, it is it's slightly paler than a lot of the others we've had, not in a bad way. Again, it's got a sort of an ivory, slightly yellow guise to it. The rind is artisanal. But we love that. I know that word means nothing, and it's like mineral in wine, but it is showing some character. It's got a few sort of crevices on there. There is some mold formation. I don't know, on the bottom of yours, is it a bit damp? That's the only thing.
It is a bit damp, but it doesn't look like it's really gone too far into the cheese.
No, not at all. It just looks topically damp. It hasn't eaten in, as we've seen in other examples.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it looks really nice. It tells me like there's not too much halo. I think I'm going to get a lot of cheese that is like top quality as a proportion of this wedge.
Yep.
It really is extremely aromatic in a slightly wild way. Like that smokiness is sort of on the spectrum with sort of phenol, peat, kind of tar. You know, there's just a lot going on there.
Phenol for
I
sure.
want some.
I'm gonna have to do a care package. I immediately on smelling this, I was thinking sort of again from the French links or Cantal, sort of Auvergne style cheeses. There is something of that slightly wild, not chemical but phenol kind of aromas. That I haven't gone in yet.
Beat you to it. Mm. It's interesting, the texture, it's quite moist, and I feel like that maybe in part explains why it has so much aroma. There's a lot of breakdown, there's a lot going on there. It's interesting, in the mouth, I'm finding the flavor just a little bit muddy, just a little bit unfocused, indistinct. I feel like everything about this cheese is leading me to think it's going to be like a tsunami of flavor. And it feels like there's a lot of enzymatic activity, but the net impression is not like a focused beam of flavor, but more something a little bit indistinct. I don't know what you think, Emma.
The same. I think that I was expecting it to have a bit more structure in terms of where the flavor is going. The acidity is incredibly brash. It's a tiny bit itchy. There is a lot happening, but it feels a bit muddled. There's a lot happening, but it doesn't feel like it's tied together quite.
Yeah, it's interesting about the acidity because I was almost like, it feels and it looks the way it's friable and the way it's sort of it looks quite demineralized and it looks quite high acidity, but actually in my mouth it tasted almost low acidity.
Oh, you did? Oh, really? Okay.
To me, and it's interesting, I would value a sense check on that because maybe I'm in the wrong place, but it almost feels like part of that muddiness is almost like the acidity isn't enough to kind of rein it in, that there's something just a little bit kind of, seems so mean to say dull, and I don't mean that in like the worst way, but just a little bit indistinct around the edges. And I wonder if that's partly down to a lack of acidity. I don't know.
How far in did you go? Can I see your rind?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to double check. I went like pretty far in. I am definitely getting a sort of Salaire Cantal acidity. So I'm wondering whether they've traveled slightly differently, because we've been so spot on in everything else we're agreeing on. So I'm not quite sure if that's a different.
I'm not, I think it's important to say, like, I agree with you. There is acid there.
Maybe. Do you think there should be more? I think it's sort of
there should be more, or there's something like, yeah, there's just something, maybe it's just the muddled, slightly dull overall impression.
Yeah. I think that's
it's not like a low acid style. It's not like an Alpine style cheese where it's like low acid to begin with. It just feels like, I don't know, I want more shape to the flavor.
I think that's exactly it. It needs to be sort of reined in and controlled a bit more. It's slightly unruly at the moment, which is not a problem, but when that unruly isn't quite making sense is what we're looking for it to sort of have its personality, but within a slightly smaller parameter than.
Yeah.
Whew,
it's a bit noisy.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. Okay.
Let's try and give us some scores on this one. So let's start with the visual aspect.
Nice.
Good.
I like the way it looks.
I very much like the way it looks. It's got its character. It's got its personality. yeah, the only thing we said was a slightly damper bottom, but it isn't encroaching on the paste, so it's not a huge problem. I think we're, I don't know, about eight.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. 8.
Yeah.
Hey, aroma, guys.
I like the aroma. It promises a lot. Maybe part of this is the expectations game, you know, like we were like so revved up.
I think so too. I think the aroma is fabulous. It promises loads, but it was also just incredibly sort of, again, that personality shows through. You've got lots of complexity on the nose there. It's showing that it wants to give you a lot, and it does give a lot. Just at this stage, the aroma is lovely. So what, 8.5, 9, 9?
Let's go 9. Let's go 9. Let's go 9. It's super complex and
I
interesting.
put it down. 9. Moving on.
Texture.
A little bit sticky and a little bit wet for me, and I think that might be part of the problem. So
I agree. Maybe a 7.5, 7.
7.
And then finally the flavour, please, ladies.
I mean, I almost want to like say a 5.5 or a 6. It's just, it lets it down.
It really does, and I think that there, from everything that we've seen happening, this has the potential to be absolutely knockout. I think at this stage it is noisy and very erratic, and it doesn't quite come together. I think 6.
6.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Hey, we are now moving on to J1 1160.
This is handwritten. I don't know if you can see the label, but there it is. Ooh. All the different shapes and sizes.
I was going to say, that looks really intriguing.
I'll give this a little scrape here.
That last one, the sort of the erraticness has made me want to reach for a little cracker.
I might have a cracker, yeah. Cracker break.
Okay. Whenever I see shapes like this, as a monger, it does give me a bit of a twitch, because it's such a beautiful shape, but my goodness, wrapping these, that is nothing at all to do with this competition. And it's also quite a fun challenge, but it does
also the number of the pieces that are this shape that end up on the floor in the cheese shop.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's roll like, off.
Exactly.
Really,
oh,
really.
wow. Okay.
Right.
That's my takeaway from today.
Maybe you sell more cheese that way though, because
it's running away, guys. It's running.
Okay, so this cheese is yeah, sort of UFO or rounded edge shape. On the rind itself, it's got quite a lovely color to it, slightly sort of matte white molds on the outside and some striations, I guess, from a mold or a colander looking moldy type thing. Quite dark paste.
Yeah, quite golden.
For a cheese this size, I mean, I don't know milk variety, obviously, but for a cheese this size and aging, I wouldn't expect it to be as dark in color. So perhaps it's a different milk. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it could be a different milk. I think it could be telling us something about the acidity as well. You know, the degree of scattering.
Yeah, oh God, it is rolling. Okay.
What's the aroma like, guys?
Quite simple, a little bit sort of warm and warm cooked milk. There's not a huge amount I'm getting from it. It's quite a simple, very, very one-dimensional aroma. It's
I'm getting a lot of rind aroma as well. That, like, I'm smelling the rind more than I'm smelling what's inside.
I was definitely expecting a lot more from the paste. It is, you have to put it again right to your nose, but what's coming off when you do that is very much one simple sort of cheesy cheese cooked milk.
Yeah, it's quite simple. It's not, the aroma isn't jumping out, it's not projecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Even giving it a bit of a squish as well, it's still not really developed into anything hugely complex, but there's no off notes.
It's a bit bitty, but it's broken down enough that I feel like it's ripe. You know, it's fully mature. The texture of the paste is a little bit astringent, a bit grippy.
Yeah.
Slightly drying. And the flavor is slightly winey.
Yeah, absolutely. Slightly winey. Yeah, it's quite simple in its flavor profile. It's let me try it again. For someone who doesn't usually shut up, I haven't got a load to say about it in flavor right now. Let me try.
All we've said about it so far is it's slightly whiny.
It's quiet. It's quite quiet.
It's very quiet, muted. It's timid. I think it's hiding away. I don't know if it's the age it's at, or if there's something. It's not giving us much at all.
Yeah, and you know, it may be suffering from the order that it's being shown. I mean, in this lineup, you've got a lot of really big cheeses, but you know, just thinking about this cheese on its own, I don't think that it would be something that would necessarily distinguish itself on a cheese board. It would be a very difficult one to, you know, it needs more going on. It needs a bit turning up. It needs a bit more of a defined character, I would say.
I think so too. I think definitely in terms of the order we've done things in, we have jumped around, but I think between Bronwyn and I, we'd still sort of be able to pick out a bit more if it was showing more. I think on a board, if it was with a load of other cheeses, for certain you'd want to eat this quite near to the beginning, but it is still very restrained and muted, and we're not getting much from it.
Okay. Do you want to have a go at scoring it?
Yes.
Go appearance.
I kind of like it. It's sort of rustic. I think as an erstwhile monger, I would want to mark it down slightly for the shape. It's just hard to cut, hard to handle, and hard to wrap. And to be honest, yeah, hard to put on your cheese board as well. I mean, I suppose maybe you put it on its side, but it's an awkward shape. And I know that lots of people like this shape because they can get molds inexpensively and replace molds inexpensively, but colanders are not the best cheese molds. So I think I'd mark it down a little bit from that perspective as well.
I do like the outer appearance. However, yeah, the paste is, it's good looking. There could be a little bit more action on the outside as well. Maybe a 7.
Yeah,
6.5, 7.
It's 7.
7, yeah.
Okay, guys, aroma.
I mean,
it's such a shy cheese. I always want to tell it's allowed to show itself. It's okay. We're all friends here. The aroma is very, very muted. I can't really give it much of a score because there isn't much there. It's not just that it's subtle, but when you do smell it also, there's not a huge amount happening either.
Yeah, I might say 5.
Yeah.
Okay, texture.
I mean, it feels nicely uniform. It's a little bit of a combination of dry and powdery that is a slightly, you know, I guess the texture doesn't do a lot to redeem it, I would say. Sometimes you can get a cheese that doesn't have a lot in the way of aroma or flavor, but the texture is just so lovely that, you know, it's almost like you can forgive a lot because it just feels so good in your mouth. And I don't really like, to my mind, the astringency and slight powderiness are factors that I would take into account, giving it something maybe like a 6.
Agreed. I find it slightly confused in its texture as well. I think 6 is 6.
Lovely. And finally, flavor, please.
So flavor, again, we've said it's incredibly shy, it's timid. The flavors which come through are very simple. We are ladies of many words and it wasn't really giving us much to talk about. So simple is not a problem, but simple and incredibly sort of well established is a good thing. This is simple but not quite even comfortable with the flavors which are coming through in that simplicity. So I'm really around sort of a 5.5, 6, I think, on flavor.
No, I agree. Let's say 5.5. I do think, I think there's room for this cheese to do so much more than it's doing.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah.
Okay.
Nice, thank you very much. The next one we're going on to is 1165.
Okay, totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different cheese once again.
Back to waking us up.
Nice little round.
There you go, 1165. Alrighty, so we're moving on to, we haven't had any of these yet, have we? We've only had like a softish blue. We haven't had any soft other. So we've gone on to a bloomy rind, which is quite small, petite, nice snacking pocket, Emma pocket size.
I love it. Yeah.
It's very well kept. There is not much mold diversity at all on the rind, but it is very clean and
Immaculate. I might
immaculate.
Ooh,
quite evenly broken down, to the extent I might even say that this recipe might contain some thermophiles and be using stabilized cheese technology, which again is probably giving us this very easy to handle uniform texture. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out when we're tasting it. But yeah, I mean, it looks extremely correct.
Have you, Bronwyn, on yours? I've got a tiny bit of a sort of grey dulling halo just beneath the rind, only ever so slight. But if we're being like really picky, it's just not as bright as I was expecting from looking at the outer paste. It's very slight though.
Yeah, no, I mean, the rind, I like the fact that the rind is well adhered. It's not peeling. There's no like, you know, again, I don't think, I think this cheese is stabilized. And I think as a result of that, you're not going to get a lot of these like massive rind defects that are one of the reasons why this style of cheese is so technically difficult to make when you're not using stabilized technology. I agree. Yeah, it's a little dull right underneath the rind. Very mushroomy.
It's champignon de Paris. That's it. It's just really sort of what you'd expect if you were to tell an alien what a bloomy rind should smell like. This is what we're smelling. It is white mushrooms. I haven't really got anything else at all on the aroma. It's a very clean, lovely white mushroom aroma, but that's all.
No, yeah, nothing else on the right. And then like a very kind of plain lactic aroma of the cheese.
Yep. I do like the, despite the sort of dullish colour that I mentioned, I do like the glossy custardy breakdown. That looks good.
Yeah, no, and actually, as an eating experience, it's very nice. I mean, it's like, it's smooth. It feels like it's ticking every box it set out to tick. And yet, as a cheese, it's not very interesting.
Yeah, this is where Bronwyn was talking about sort of texture having an enormous and a really integral part of our sort of sensory experience in cheese. This is ticking that box of yum, glossy, custardy, unctuous, could eat this whole thing because that texture is lovely and approachable. But if we are not just eating it because of that and thinking more about the flavor, which we are in this competition, it is simple, correct, but there is not much personality.
Yeah. And the thing I want to say is like, you are farming these animals. This is like your chance to give the world a taste of your individual farm. And it feels like the cheese making is being very successful in like obscuring any element of, or any possibility that I'm ever going to be able to tell you anything about what that farm is like.
Yeah.
You know, that this could have come very easily from like standardized milk in a big factory. And that's not to say your milk isn't interesting. It might be fantastically interesting, but like the cheese making is just completely getting in the way of my ability to know. And that's, to my mind, that's like lost value. Because like at the end of the day, if somebody wants this style of cheese, why should they pay 3 times as much, you know, to get it from you? Because I'm sure that you're not making it 100,000 of these a day. Why should somebody pay 3 times as much for the same experience as they could get by going to this like corner store and buying a cheap factory free. So like, maybe that sounds harsh, but it's only because I'm very frustrated because I feel like you're going to the trouble of farming these animals and doing, I'm sure, a really amazing job at that. Like, to be able to realize and see that value in the cheese that you're making as well would be really, really satisfying. At least
I mean, I do completely agree. Let it shine. I wonder whether if this cheesemaker is in the beginning of their journey, then this is a very, very well made cheese. So I think this is something that if I'm not a cheesemaker at all, but if I was starting, I'd want to definitely bed down the recipe, get it perfect first. So I wonder whether now, because this is so well made, this is now the time to take all of the advice that Bronwyn's just given and get a bit more creative, allow the rest of those factors to shine and to allow that cheese to become more of your thing than just a generic bloomy rind. Yeah. Should we score?
Yes, please. Let's go for appearance.
Oh, this is interesting because on one level, it's like, how close is it to what it's setting out to be, which I would say is probably very close, versus how close is it to an aesthetic ideal that matches the ideal of a farmhouse cheese?
I think this is also quite a difficult philosophical one to answer. I think if we're going to look at a bloomy rind cheese, it has been looked after properly, the coating is correct, the Penicillium candidum's grown everywhere, there are no sort of damp patches, no over ripening. I think it is done very well. So I think technically it is very pretty and it all looks great. The only thing I would mark down is that slight dull appearance. However, I think as well as the scoring that we will give, it is very important to say that there isn't much sort of diversity on here. And I think, as we've said in lots of words, that there is a bit more personality to be given. But it looks textbook great. The rind is formed properly. It's glossy. It's yellow. It's not faulty.
Should we give an average that says nothing about, that says nothing about it because it's a combination of both, like very good and not good? Like, I would say 7.
I think 7.5. I think 7.5. Yeah. And I mean, we both come from the same school here. I French bries, camemberts, all of these things. The diversity is what gives it the extra, but there is not anything really technically wrong with it to bring it down even further. For me, it's just not got the excitement. So yeah, 7.5.
Thank you, guys.
Aroma, however, is textbook but does not do anything. So this is a tricky one also. So it's just white mushroom. That is just the mold. There is nothing coming through from the milk, from the paste, from anything else. It is just the mold that we can smell.
I think, at least I'd want to have a little bit more buttery dairy presence and not just the smell of the mold culture. So I would probably go 6 on that.
I think 6 is fair. Yeah.
Okay, texture.
Texture is fine. The rind isn't chewy or papery, which is something that can definitely happen in this style, and I definitely commend you for
That's nice. It is a nice thin rind, I have to say. It's not thick. Texture, yeah, I mean, it's a stabilized texture, which again I associate not only with industrial production, but with a certain bent of industrial production where it's meant to ripen really quickly. Right. And, I feel like it's not as technically difficult to achieve as something that's based more on mesophilic starters and acidification and breakdown from the outside in. So even though the texture is quite smooth and the rind is thin, I think I would mark it down on that basis. So, yeah, I probably personally, I'd go with 6. Feel free to push it up, Emma.
I will. I think I'd push it up ever so slightly, because of the way that this style can go so wrong. I think because you can get really papery thick rinds, you can get I know it's stabilized, you're not going to get the peeling, etc., etc. I'll push up just a half mark just to make a bit of a my side, but I do think that there is a lot more room for it being more interesting. So I think 6.5, I'd be happy.
Cool. Okay, and finally, flavor, guys.
Okay. The flavor is it's not showing much at all. It's not showing much excitement. We're judging against a big variety of cheeses here. We've shown lots of personality. This one for me, I can't give much in terms of flavor at all. Even though there's no faults, there is not excitement for me. I wouldn't really remember it. And the thing which I'm going to think in competitions where you're judging lots of cheeses is, would I want to seek it out? Would I remember it later? It's very pleasant and faultless, but I don't find it very interesting in its personality. Bronwyn, what do you think?
I totally agree. I mean, again, I'm going to say 5, and then again, you feel free to.
I'm going to go with 5 with you.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Our penultimate cheese for this morning is 1169.
Yeah, yeah.
1169. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we are going into hard territory again.
Mm-hmm.
Got lots of like sort of alpine influence cheeses this morning, haven't we?
A lot of cooked press, yeah.
Yeah.
And this one probably the most sort of directly cooked press, sort of continental inspired one of all of them so far, I would say.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, nice golden paste. I would say quite a lot of lateral slits, which always make me a little nervous with this style of cheese. Yeah, to the extent that the cheese is just about holding together in terms of its structural integrity, but they're sort of laced through with openings.
There are too many openings. There are definitely too many openings. I
And
think you can see.
I can smell them too.
Oh yeah, there we go. So visually the rind is very well kept. It has, yeah, it looks very, very well looked after. There is I haven't got any sort of cracks or fissures on the rind. It looks like it's been brushed and cared for really well.
Yeah.
The paste, however, even despite its lovely golden color, is cracking a lot, and as Bronwyn said, we can smell it already. It's also a very, very, very thin wedge, and this is just some sort of feedback to people entering this competition, because as you've seen, we cut really far in and we want to make sure that we're tasting the best of the cheese. A thin wedge is quite hard to make sure that we need to trim it, and then we aren't really left with much in the middle. So fatter, bulky wedges are slightly better, but we are going to trim this a lot to get into the middle.
Totally, trim and scrape. I have to say, with the scraping, it does feel like a nice texture. There's something there. It's not corky. It's not curdy.
No, it feels good. Yeah. But the aroma, yeah. I mean, Bronwyn, do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, I think what we're seeing here is a pretty classic case of butyric blowing. So spores within the milk that contribute to gas production, not during the make, but during the months after the make, as these spores, you know, and I don't know if this cheese is pasteurized or not, but it doesn't really matter because the spores can survive pasteurization, and really, really low numbers, you know, just a couple spores per liter of milk are capable in these very sensitive low acid styles of cooked breast cheeses in particular, although Goudas aren't particularly cooked and they're also quite vulnerable to blowing. And when that happens, it's not just an aesthetic thing from a visual perspective, but you also get the release of butyric acid and gas, and that butyric acid has a really kind of dirty, rancid sort of smell and taste, which is not pleasant. And you can really smell that. Like, it's hard for me to know what the flavor of this cheese is because that slightly rancid smell is the dominant one that
it is just taking over everything. So it is very, very hard for us to smell anything else in it.
And, you know, it's one of the reasons why, you know, the feeding of silage is forbidden in the PDO specifications for so many of these cooked pressed cheeses within Europe, is because it is extraordinarily difficult to make milk of a, you know, spore-free consistency that's going to work for these styles of cheese, which is one of the reasons why all of these high acid, like territorial cheddar Stilton styles evolved in the UK, was to make the best use of the milk that, you know, we make in this climate, and the feeds that we can make in this climate. Not that people have been making silage for thousands of years, because they haven't, but be that as it may, our climate is not conducive to making milk that makes these styles of cheese easy to make. And my feeling would be most people who are making these cheeses successfully in the UK are probably adding lysozyme or nitrates to their milk to prevent those blowing bacteria. So I mean, like, depending on the flexibility of your farming system, your appetite for change and risk, I would say maybe considering some sort of, if you're committed to making this style of cheese here, use the tools at your disposal to avoid that, because I really think that it's a shame to see all that work go into making something that's, that's not working in this way.
So in terms of the mouthfeel, guys,
texturally, it's lovely. It's smooth. It's homogeneous. It feels, it breaks down nicely into a paste in the mouth. It is a very pleasant texture. Pleasant texture. It doesn't have any sort of powdery elements. Texture-wise, it's great.
I agree. It's really a nice texture, quite melting. I like it. I like the milkiness of it. There's a, behind that really butyric aroma, I feel like there's a good cheese there. Slightly itchy. And again, thinking about the source of those sorts of itchy sensations might be, I think there's research that associates that with certain biofilms, particularly in milking machines and pipework, certain varieties of lactobacillus. So it might be worth looking at that. But overall, I would say technically, this is a great cheese that's being undermined by the milk not really being appropriate for making this style of cheese.
Yep.
okay.
There's a lot for you there, Cara. It's all really valuable. It's so valuable, though. I really hope that the cheesemaker really does take on these comments, because my goodness, that's that's some insight for you there. And also, we do see the potential for a really good cheese here. There are just some elements which Bronwyn went through and really interesting for everyone detail there to see what's happened as a snapshot on this cheese.
Okie dokie. Let's go for the appearance.
Rind beautiful, absolutely well kept. Chapeau to the cheesemaker here. You have really looked after the exterior of this cheese. It is something that I see time and time again where that's not done in the paste. We've got these fissures. They're throughout. If they weren't there, the paste itself is golden, lovely and smooth, but we're going to have to mark it down on that.
I agree. Apart from the fissures, it's beautiful. So, I mean, again, I would say probably 6, because the fissures are pretty big. Pretty big.
Okay, aroma.
It's 40. I think on this one it's a no-brainer. It's the other aromas which you might get from them aren't there. It is just the fault we are smelling. The sort of butyric action. It's not something that we can really score. How do you want us to score a 40 cheese, Cara, in aroma?
It's a tricky one, because I'd love to be able to give it the benefit of the doubt.
There isn't anything else on the nose, is the only thing I would say. That is the only thing that we can smell. So in this category, in this criteria, I don't think we can do much for it. If there's a sort of I don't know, 4.
4 probably. I mean, yeah, I think it's unavoidable. And with the context that I think behind that, if you could avoid that fault, there's some interesting things that would be very likely to come out, and it would be much higher.
It sounds like it's got a huge amount of promise. It's just
absolutely, yes. It's just this snapshot. This is unfortunately the way of a competition. We're judging on exactly what's in front of us.
It is, but at least there's some amazing feedback there. So thanks, guys. Texture.
Great, really nice. It's got the fissures, but absolutely beautiful, sort of smooth, homogeneous in the mouth. It's very lovely. It melts down into a nice sort of paste. The texture is very good.
I would say it's for its style, it's one of the nicest textures that we've had today.
I think so too. Wow. Yeah, it's very good. This is another cheese which can either go sort of powdery, too hard, a little bit waxy, but grainy. This is very good. I think we're up in sort of like 8 land, maybe 8. Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, flavor, please.
Unfortunately, I think it's sort of in the same category as the aroma, that it's just so dominated by that faulty aspect that it's going to be hard to give it, honestly, that highest score. I would say maybe 5.
I think 5, just because there is, whereas with the aroma, there was nothing apart from that off aroma. We have got a sort of peek around the corner of something which would be there if it wasn't so hidden. So I think 5 because of the faults, but also we can see something poking out. Absolutely, without those faults, there would be some really, really promising, exciting flavors and aromas here. And this is just one cheese of this batch.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, so on to our last cheese of the morning. I can't work out whether you guys are going to be delighted that it's the last one, or
I've really enjoyed this. No,
I am too. I think
great
it's been a
time.
really fascinating lineup.
brilliant. So J1 1173. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah. Hold that up. Now, this is very interesting given our conversation on the last one, because this definitely has some slits in it as well. And it's going to be really, really interesting as we taste and look at this cheese to see whether those are mechanical or gas. And if they are gas, whether they're butyric or whether they're something else. So.
Have you smelt it? Yeah. I have a hefty, heady whack of acetone.
Yeah, very much so.
Again, going right into the middle just to see what happens. But the initial aroma is, yeah, chemical, slightly chemical, bit of acetone, nail varnish remover.
Very, very toppy, a little bit horseradishy.
Yes. I was trying to put my finger on it. I was thinking, yeah, wasabi. I was thinking something along those lines. Yeah, horseradish. That's it. I like horseradish.
Of horseradish.
Okay, so appearance-wise, it is very clean, correct, clinical almost. So on the rind itself, was there a cloth that's come off? There's nothing on the outside at all. Like,
no, it is. It's barren on the outside. Very clean paste, very kind of quite light colored, quite bright, but at the same time maybe paler than almost anything else that we've looked at.
Yeah. The texture's great. It's buttery. It breaks down. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's quite giving. Yeah,
it's yielding, isn't it? It gives a nice sort of it's got a nice pudge to it. It's got a fair amount of moisture still within there, and it breaks down into a nice sort of smooth paste. Maybe almost slightly too pasty though at the end here. It's a little tiny bit cloying.
Slightly cloying, and again, it doesn't leave stickiness on my fingers, but it just feels a little bit wet.
Fatty or wet, or yeah, it's a bit greasy on my fingers. I don't know if it's, yeah, you can't see any sort of free moisture or wet or wetness, can you? But it is just there's something filming on my fingers. Slightly itchy.
Yeah, not to the extent of some of the other cheeses that we've tried today, but there's just something a little bit hollow about it. That, as you say, there's that slight sort of acetone toppy edge, and then I want some big savory, juicy flavors to come out of this, and it just feels a little hollow to me.
Yep, agreed.
So what are the flavors that are coming through, guys?
It's like ever so slightly sweet, which is interesting.
But what is it though? It's like sort of milk sweet, isn't it? It's not really like, again, it's not confectionery sweet, but I am getting sweet, maybe, yeah, just lots of dairy flavors, to be honest. But this is what I'm getting as the main guys, which is where I think we're both looking for that extra edge, because dairy is sort of textbook for a cheese.
It goes without saying, yeah.
So the horseradish element in the aroma hasn't come through in anything sort of earthy or vegetal, or there's not a huge amount of complexity. It feels young-ish, maybe. Possibly it could do with a bit more aging, but it's. I think this is exactly where the cheesemaker wants it to be, but we're just looking for something more.
And the other thing I would say is I'd be hesitant to age this particular cheese much more because of that slight itch.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That could, my guess would be that would turn up even as you might be getting a little bit more flavors, and it's almost like it's operating on this very high toned register, and what it's missing is that more like savory base element.
That's very true. Yeah, agreed. Okay.
All right. Appearance?
Sorry, just saying it just wants a bit more punch.
A bit more sort of there's a layer missing, it feels like. So it's almost like we've got the top layer without the base. It's got the sort of like the nice sort of milky dairy element. Then there's a bit of a hole.
It wants a bit more stuffing.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. That really helps.
Yeah.
Baggy. Let's do the same as to go with the top. So dairy notes. Sorry.
That's good.
Needs another layer. There we go. Okay, so appearance-wise,
it's very clinical.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you'd use the word clinical, because that was the one that came to mind. Like it's very clean. It's very pale. Yeah. It's got some openings. You know, I would probably give it a 6. Is that too harsh?
I think 6.5. I think it is incredibly clinical. It's not that there's anything massively wrong with it. It is a bit pale, which it looks slightly anemic, and I think there's quite a lot of holes, and it is, I think 6.5 is a bit fairer. I think. Okay. Yeah.
Aroma?
That sort of very toppy nature, which follows through in the flavor, really comes through there. For me, the aroma is also a little thin and washed out and quite high toned in a way that I would love for this style of cheese to be a little bit more base noted and like, I don't know, I don't want to say wholesome, but just a bit more of a base note. So again, I would maybe say 6.5, 7.
6.5, 7. Yeah. I think 6.5. I was quite distracted by that sort of acetone note as well, so I think 6.5 is where I'd sit to.
Okay, texture.
It's like I agree with you that it feels a little bit happy, but there's something nice about the way that it dissolves on my tongue. I could see certain people who might be a bit turned off by the more firm, waxy cheeses that we've had within this lineup, really like that slightly more giving, soluble. For me, it was a little soft. Maybe
I
7.
think, yeah. I think just in terms of adding to that, it's a very valuable point that not everyone wants a sort of a firmer, drier texture, and that some do want a bit more giving textures. The when I said it's sort of coating, it wasn't like it was really cloying and coating my mouth, but it did leave a bit of a film, which is also what I think's been on our hands too. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but I am slightly distracted by it. I think, did you say 7? Yeah, 7.
Thank you, guys. And then finally, flavor.
I mean, I really expected a little bit more. I would say maybe 6.5.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I'm just going to have a little whiz up here. Yeah.
We can make any last minute adjustments to that we're
I was going to say, you know, the other day we did go back, having been through all of them, and remark a couple that we thought were maybe undermarked, or but I think you guys have been quite consistent throughout.
I think it's really, I think we can sort of imagine where the scoring's gone, because it's been so obvious, I think, with the ones which were of the caliber where we're putting them on our lunch board.
Yes.
Lunch board top 3.
So just trying to double triple check this.
Also, though, what an incredible category. That was very exciting. So much sort of traditional, new age, new recipes, things which are like the Alpine style. That's really something that's been quite obvious in this category. And I'm so excited about the Tom that came into.
There's some real standouts there. And I mean, like, I really feel privileged to have been chosen to because I think, for at least for me, this is the ultimate prestige category. So yeah, some really exciting cheeses in here.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you
for
to you
giving this to
guys
us.
for some, yeah. Oh, yeah, you can pay me later.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for all the feedback on it. I think it's so important that the actual makers understand why people judge the way they judge and the reasons behind it, and it all being set open. But I'm delighted, and you guys won't be surprised to know that the winning cheese for this category, J1, is J1 1078.
Yeah, of course. I'm holding it already.
No, that doesn't surprise me at
Of
all.
course.
All right, what's number 2?
So that one will be going through to the category finals on the 14th of May, and hopefully again through to the final on the 15th. I just obviously personally want to thank you both for.
Do we get to hear number 2?
Yeah, sorry. Could we know 2 and
I'll
3?
tell you number 2 and number
2
3.
and
Number
3, is that all right?
Yeah, number 2 is 1098.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
And number 3 is 1100. Oh no, I'm half a point out. Number 3 is 1130.
No, that doesn't sound right to me. Are you because that got quite a low flavor score.
That got a 6 flavor score.
How do you feel about that, Emma? Because to me, that doesn't feel like number 3.
No, yeah, that's not the one I thought was going to be number 3. I think it was definitely up there in the sort of the top half, but I thought that we brought it down a fair amount because of the flavor.
You gave it an 8 for appearance, a 9 for aroma, a 7 for texture, and a 6.
And that's third.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, do we want to adjust that, or are we happy?
What's the one under? I mean, is this
The next one down? Yeah.
So the next one down, there's like 0.25 between it. So if you want to adjust,
what was the next one down?
Is 1100.
1100. Oh, so the younger, slightly spicy one. Where did 1095 sit?
That was exactly my question. that was going to be my question. I was assuming that one was going to be third.
Sorry, no, you are completely right, and I am completely wrong.
Okay, good, because I thought this was going to be here.
Sorry, I'm just looking through, and it is 1095.
Okay, fine, perfect.
This is the silver.
Oh, that's silver. Great.
Yeah, great. I'm super happy with that. I think it's important that cheese gets its fair dues.
Yeah, and then that makes 1098.
I'm very happy with that.
Your bronze.
Yeah, very, very happy. That's really good.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys.
Very happy.
Wonderful.
Brilliant morning judging. Just want to say thank you again to Butlers for the beautiful aprons that our judges are fronting for us all, and to the wonderful Peter's Yard for being our cracker partner and supplying us with some amazing crackers. Again, thank you very much. The winning cheese is 1078. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Great.